Her name is Elahe Zivardar. She was detained on Nauru for almost 7 years. She came from Iran to seek asylum in Australia, and she studied engineering and architecture in Iran. During her time on Nauru, she used videos and photography to document the horrific conditions of the camps. She's now living in LA after her refugee claim was accepted by the US.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Bella, for introducing me. Thank you for having me today. In 2013, I fled Iran, got into a boat from Indonesia, and headed to Christmas Island in Australia to seek asylum. Instead of receiving any help or support, I was exiled and imprisoned in Offshore Detention Center for 6 years. In February 2019, I was accepted by the United States of America due to the deal between the Australian government and the USA. Now I live and work as a journalist in Washington, D.C. I believe it's my responsibility to warn the world against adopting such policies and deliberately torturing vulnerable people. I was held in offshore detention on the remote and impoverished Pacific island of Nauru for 6 years by the Australian government. It was a place designed to torture asylum seekers by denying us our human rights while keeping us detained indefinitely. We went without clean water and electricity for days at a time. The environment was polluted with heavy metals because we were imprisoned inside a former phosphate mine. We lived in plastic tents surrounded by toxic black mold and cadmium-laced dust from the nearby phosphate processing plant. There was asbestos dumped next to our living quarters. There were many tropical diseases and viruses such as chikungunya and dengue fever. Despite all of the health hazards and poisons we were subjected to, we were routinely denied medical treatment until our conditions worsened. And 12 of us died from this lack of treatment. Even worse than that, all this harm was inflicted on small children and pregnant women as well. All this was done with the full knowledge and approval of the Australian authorities. When an organization or individual professionals working there had enough integrity to call out the abuses they witnessed, their contracts would be terminated along with their visas to Nauru, and they would be on the next flight to Australia. This usually kept the companies in line, but in the case of Doctors Without Borders, it did not work. They kicked MSF out of Nauru after less than a year because they were documenting and reporting the real extent of people's medical issues. The disastrous mental health situations of the detainees, including most of the children. By sending them out, they blocked the only real mental health services that people were receiving and created new health issues for people. The asylum seekers were told that they would be processed and their asylum cases assessed before going to Australia. But more than 8 years later, many are still detained there, despite being found to be genuine refugees. Instead of being processing centers, these offshore prisons are designed to be a place of torture, humiliation, cruelty, and racism, intended to drive innocent people, including hundreds of children and women, to either go back to the countries that they came from or risk death and disease out of sight of the media and out of the minds of the public. They are effectively disappeared. During those dark years that I spent there, my art is what kept me going. Art was one way that I managed to keep my sanity while detained indefinitely in Nauru. It was also one way that I could reach people, artists, activists, and others to try to show our humanity, that we are also human beings who were locked away out of sight. While I was in detention in Nauru, I managed to secretly film and photograph a lot of the inside of the detention center and the dangerous conditions there. I recorded the personal testimonies of many of the detainees there. I'm using some of that footage to create a mixed media documentary about the architecture of torture in Australia's offshore detention centers as well as several other collaborations and projects to try to drive the conversation forward. My main message to the UK, as someone who has experienced it firsthand, is to stand against what I and Dr. Omid Tawfiqian of Sydney University call the border industrial complex. Like the military-industrial complex, it is inherently destructive, driven by profits, and its victims are always innocent civilians. It has been conceived and tested in Australia, where it has become a $2 billion a year program that currently achieves on paper little more than holding around 300 refugees hostage on tiny islands far away from Australian society. Australia's border industrial complex has managed to manipulate the Australian people and quietly siphon away their tax dollars out of sight of the Australian public and out of reach of Australian laws by making deals with corrupt foreign governments willing to do their dirty work. Despite the horrendous human, financial, and moral disaster that is Australia's offshore detention policy, the border industrial complex continues to promote it as a model for other countries to emulate, and that is why we are here today in the UK. Thanks to Australia, many companies can now offer the UK government their expertise in this emerging border industrial complex sector, having gained lucrative experience in Nauru, Manus Island, and Christmas Island. Companies with terrible track records of abuses, corruption, and fraud, like Serco, which I'm sure you're all familiar with there in the UK, will probably stand to gain huge profits. If it's not stopped here in the UK right now, if we don't stop the UK from repeating the mistakes of Australia, we run the risk of the border industrial complex growing exponentially, more wealthy, and entrenching itself deeper within our domestic politics and further influencing international refugees policies. UK citizens don't need to be distracted by this false narrative that torturing Black and brown people offshore will somehow keep them safe, when what would actually keep them safe would be a government that would invest those billions per year on their future, rather than giving those billions to a set of unscrupulous multinational companies to detain and torture refugees and break international humanitarian laws and obligations that the UK and Australia have long ago entered into. This policy needs to be defeated now, if not for the sake of the refugees whose lives will become a political football for the right wing in the UK, like they have been in Australia since 2001, then for the sake of the people of the UK, for the future of your society, democracy, and freedoms, for the interests of UK citizens who deserve to have politicians who spend their time developing and implementing policies that actually help them and increase their future opportunities, for the people of the UK who will need to have real plans to deal with the effects of climate change before it's too late, or to have the ability to go to world-class schools and universities and have world-class healthcare. Even if you're someone who thinks that human rights, international laws, ethics, or morality are not important in the world, which I really hope you're not, you should still oppose this cruel offshore detention legislation, just on the financial cost-benefit analysis alone. UK parliamentarians must stop the border industrial complex from violating asylum seekers' human rights for huge profits at UK taxpayers' expense. The Australian offshore detention policy has failed to stop asylum seekers, but has succeeded in enriching a handful of well-connected multinational corporations with $2 billion per year to run the offshore prisons. The Australian government sold this offshore detention policy to the Australian public with the claim that it wanted to stop asylum seekers deaths at sea, while in reality, they were further endangering their lives by sending them to an out-of-sight, faraway land and denying them medical treatment. This has led to 12 deaths in detention and thousands of others with permanent mental and physical illnesses. My message to the UK parliamentarians is not to make the same costly mistake that Australia has already made. Listen to the refugee advocates. Look at the data. Look at the human cost. Look at the price tag. Look at the multinational companies that stand to gain the most from this, and make the right choice for the future of the UK. In fact, I will go so far as to say right now that if you succeed in defeating this offshore detention legislation in the UK, you will not only be saving the people of the UK in all the way that I have mentioned, but also your strong rejection of these policies here, I really believe can be the spark that is needed to finally end the illegal and inhuman offshore detention policy in Australia as well. Thank you so much for your time.